recording. So thank you to all of you who are joining us today, and I will continue to have people joining from the waiting room, so I'll just keep that down in my lower corner of my screen. I don't know if you can see that or not, but thanks so much for joining us for our first virtual job spotlight here in Northeast Wisconsin. So my name is Lynn April, and I'm the ACP coordinator for CESA 8. And CESA 8 is one of the organizations that is sponsoring all of the events for October Manufacturing Month, along with Inspire Northeast Wisconsin, Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, and the Northeast Wisconsin Manufacturing Alliance. So we have 3 guests that are going to be joining us today. We have both Tim Straub and Jim Eckes from NERCON, which is in Oconto. They make conveyor belts. I've been through the plant. It is really a cool tour. And also Jill Thiede, who is the Associate Dean of Trades Engineering Technologies at NWTC. So let me see if I can advance the slide here. There we go. We do have 3 more dates coming up with more manufacturing jobs, so please feel free to register for those if you have not already. The next, on October 7th, we're really going to be focusing on production, so we'll be looking at welding production manager, a welding general foreman, a machinist. And then October 14th, we are looking at engineering and design. And then October 28th, electromechanical engineering. So there is a QR code that you can scan in order to go to registration. And I will have that again at the end of the presentation. Our norms for today, just so everybody understands what the rules are going to be for all of our virtual job spotlights. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast through Inspire Northeast Wisconsin. Everyone is muted, except for our speakers, of course. This prevents too many distracting background noises. Everybody's video capabilities are turned off, so only the presenters will be seen. This prevents too many distracting background images, and you don't have to be concerned about what's going on in back of you. Only the presenters will be sharing their screens, so please don't use the screen share option. If you need to leave the meeting, I will not be watching the waiting room after, once we get into our speakers. So if you decide to leave the meeting for whatever reason, you will not be able to get back in. Please do ask questions of our presenters through the chat. We do have Allison Bowie from NWTC, who's going to be manning the chat for me, and she's going to be sharing all of your questions with our speakers. So each of them will have a chunk of time after they get done speaking to answer your questions. Just keep in mind that anything you enter into chat is visible to the group. And we don't anticipate needing to do this, but we do have the ability to remove anyone from the meeting if they're becoming distracting. So we hope that you just really enjoy the information that will be shared today. So in formatting what our October looks like for Manufacturing Month, we really looked at these subcategories of the pathways map for advanced manufacturing. And the 4 sub-pathways that we decided that we would feature in October are production, engineering and design, industry 4.0, and electromechanical. So today we're really focusing on the operations and manufacturing manager positions in the production subcategory. And then you'll get a little preview of what Industry 4.0 is all about. So before we jump into our speakers, I have just a little quiz question for you, something for you to type into the chat. For a manufacturing manager position, and this is right from the Zello page, how much post-secondary education do you think is needed to get a career as a manufacturing manager? Would it be with a diploma or a certificate that is under a year? With an associate degree, that's about usually 2 years. With a bachelor's degree, that's usually 4 years. A master's degree, that's usually 6 to 7 years, or a professional degree of 8 years or more. So if you would type into the chat, and I'll have Allison let me know, what do you think is let's say the minimum amount of post-secondary education you need in order to become a manufacturing manager? Type those into the chat. So far, I'm not seeing Anything typed into, oh, there's one.
We have one, yep. Bachelor's degree, master's degree.
Okay.
Associates.
So kind of all over. We will be hearing from our speakers today what their career pathways were to become manufacturing managers. So we'll get an idea of the type of post-secondary education you need for that particular position. So thank you for those of you who joined us for that. So we are going to start off with our speakers today with Tim Straub of NWTC, and he is going to be telling us about his position as a project manager. And I'm going to unshare my screen so that we can see Jim.
Thanks, Lynn. I like your question there, because I think a lot of what I'm about to talk about has to do with exactly that, and what our expectations and what a lot of people who are still in school think is their path and what's going to happen. Myself, I graduated from high school near the Detroit area. I actually grew up south of Detroit, so I'm about 500 and some odd miles from where I used to call home right now. And because I grew up near the Detroit area, I pretty much knew someone or knew plenty of people who worked in the automotive industry around any of the big three automakers, GM, Ford, Chrysler, those types of businesses. And so when I got done with high school, I thought that I wanted to work in that kind of field, but maybe more on the engineering end of things. And I really thought that after I got done with college, I would be a mechanical engineer of some kind. And so I headed off to college with that plan in mind. And I ended up at the University of Michigan, and I took all the classes that they thought were required for becoming an engineer, including calculus, physics, chemistry, and the other assorted curriculum. And I did that for about 4 years. And even though I was a good student in high school and I was able to get into the University of Michigan, I found out after 4 years that I'll blame it on my self-motivation. My self-motivation was really not up to the task. And after a few bad grades and finding out the hard way that the University of Michigan averages all of your grades and does not replace a bad grade with the good grade, I went and talked to a counselor, and I found out that I had put myself into a pretty hard spot. So I walked away from college, and I took a break, and I took some time to consider my options, and I actually worked. And after working at a couple of part-time jobs, realized I really needed a real job, what I'd call a real job. And so I went back to school a little bit older and a little bit wiser, and I looked into trade schools. And I found a trade school. I got involved in that school, and I found myself in a class mixed with both people younger than me and older than me. And I graduated from that school, and I got what I would call my first real job. I thought it was going to be the career for the rest of my life. And for about 4 years, I did that job, which was not in manufacturing, not even close to engineering, something completely different. And after 4 years, new owners came along, took over the business that I was working for, and they gave me the opportunity to go and find someplace else to work. So I set out and tried to find a new path, and I showed up where I am now today, 20 years later, at NWTC Engineering in Oconto, Wisconsin. And I filled out a job application just like everybody else does that walks in the door, and I honestly kind of half expected that they would just send me on my way and say thank you for coming in today. But I got the opportunity to talk to someone in HR, and I told them all about my desire to work in engineering for a mechanical company and how I had gone to school at U of M with hopes of being a mechanical engineer. And I promised them that if they offered me the job, that I would prove myself. And I got a position. I walked in the door as an entry-level assembler here at NWTC, which is the way to get in the door. That is an entry-level position. After 2 weeks, I worked here for 2 weeks, and I was asked if I wanted to be a machinist. Well, I wasn't really sure at that time what that really meant. So after some conversations, I said yes. And I found out later that this was absolutely an awesome opportunity to learn a trade. And over the next 4 years, I learned all about the machines in the machine shop. I learned how to measure with micrometers and calipers. I learned how to use manual lathes and e-mills. And eventually it got up to the point where I was programming the CNC machinery that's here in the machine shop at NWTC. sometimes, because of those parts that we make here for our conveyor systems, I would have to go and look at AutoCAD drawings in the manager's office. I was able to pull up the AutoCAD drawing software, and I learned how to inspect the drawings, create my own dimensions, and find out more information about the parts that I was supposed to be making. And that gave me some more knowledge on how things worked, and eventually I found out that NWTC had a job that happened to be an office job for a programmer for fabrication machines, and that AutoCAD was one of the requirements for that position. So I got thinking to myself, and I said, well, I can see the advantages of an office job. It's cleaner than the machine shop. It's definitely quieter. And so I approached NWTC management and asked about the position, and eventually they offered me that job with the understanding that there was learning involved, and that I would take on that responsibility. So the programmer job introduced me more to AutoCAD and the mechanical drawings that I was just starting to learn about. And at this same time, NWTC Engineering got involved with NWTC, and they offered the opportunity for all employees to better themselves through continued education. So this meant that you could take a class or several classes and earn a certificate, and certificate completion meant that there would be a pay raise eventually involved. And the classes were all based on things that NWTC deemed were important, like math and drawing skills, communication, and then even some more process improvement or quality control. I believe there were some welding classes that were available as well. And this is where I had the opportunity to really work at what I was hoping for, and that was to get more into AutoCAD and drafting. And I used this time and took these classes, and I caught up with some of the mechanical designers that I was already working with while I was in the programming department. So I went from being a simple programmer of lasers and punches in the fabrication department to programming more complex machines like our CNC router that works more in a three-dimensional type atmosphere. And at the time, that was a brand new position for NWTC. It was a brand new machine, so it was quite exciting to be invited to do that. And because the programming department was really closely related to our detailing department, I eventually got to use my skills, and I got invited to work in the detailing department too. Detailing is the part where the engineering drawings that come from the upper level, when we talk about engineering, engineers create the drawings, and then the detailing department takes those drawings and it breaks them down into the smaller parts and components that need to be made to create the conveyor that we build. So I got an opportunity then to move myself into detailing. Well, now after 20 years with NWTC and continuing education classes and plenty of on-the-job training, I now use my skills to manage sales projects for a division of NWTC that's called MCE. MCE stands for Modular Conveyor Express, and we sell conveyor that NWTC has built for years and has created as a proven solution to a lot of people's conveyor problems. On a daily basis, I get emails from people all around the United States. I get phone calls from people across the United States, and these people call me up and they treat me like an expert when it comes to figuring out what kind of conveyor they might need for in their plant. So people use our conveyor for bottling beer, maybe carrying cases of food. A lot of things we've been doing lately have to do with sanitizing, maybe even filling hand sanitizer bottles, things like that. And these people call me up and they're starting a new plant or they're modifying the plant that they have, and they rely on me to tell them what kind of conveyor would be best for their application. And I then use my listening skills to find out what they're in need of. I use my reasoning skills to determine a course of action for them. And then I get pretty good at asking questions, because sometimes people think that I should know exactly what it is that they're looking for. Somehow magically I can read their mind. But I've learned that asking questions is a very important part of this process. And then when I get all done with that, my favorite part, again, going back to drawing and the mechanical side of things, I get to use AutoCAD and I create a drawing. Sometimes I use features of their existing facility. Sometimes I have to figure out whether or not the conveyor is going to incline or decline or go around some type of barrier, or maybe the columns that are already in the building. I just love the idea of thinking through all of these interferences and getting this done. And when I am done, I'm all done being a draftsman for that job, then I get to be the salesman. And a lot of times I have to explain to the customer any choices that I made based on conversations we had previously. I then present them with a drawing and show them the potential solution to their needs. I also then use my technical writing skills. I create proposals, and on that proposal is a list of the specifications and the equipment that I'm pricing for them, descriptions of what's included. Sometimes I have to describe what's not included. MCE can fix a lot of problems, but not all of the problems. So there's a division there of what is available from me and what's not. And then of course there's a price tag on that proposal as well. And sometimes I have to be really good salesman to remind them that it's not all about price, that sometimes it's more about what it is that they're getting. So I've learned most recently that every single one of us is a salesperson, and that the company that I work for is going to do better if I help them to that point, and eventually, hopefully, that there's a trickle-down effect and that I do better in the long run as well. So most recently, I've taken some classes where I've learned how to be a better salesman, and sometimes it has to do with being persuasive and reminding people of the value of what they're getting. When you're asking people to spend thousands, tens of thousands, or even $100,000, sometimes it helps to be confident in the way that you present yourself and your product.
All right. I'm going to have Allison check the chat. One question that we have is, I heard you talking about the certifications that you worked on while you were employed at NERCON. So is it possible for a student to join NERCON right out of high school and then to continue to work on those certifications and possibly even a degree while they're working?
Absolutely, yes. NERCON has been known to do that in the past. I believe I'm going to just ask Jim. Yeah, we're still in the process of doing that. I know we've done internship programs for people before too, people who want to learn machining, fabrication machines, those types of things. So yes, NERCON is always interested in finding young, new talent and nurturing that too.
So can you give me an example of maybe a couple of positions that would be more entry level for a high school student, for example? Or recent
Well, we
graduate?
do have, we still have the one I mentioned where I got in as an entry-level assembler. And then really in that position, all you have to do is be able to learn to use, if you don't already know how, hand tools, simple hand tools, and build the conveyor itself. Because everything we ship out is partially assembled. I say partially because we obviously can't build a line that's 30 feet long and stick that in the back of a truck and send it all as one piece. It has to be assembled when it's finished. But yeah, we do offer internships for other positions as well. So we have people who work in the machine shop. We have welders and mechanical design as well. So the departments that I closely work with are mentioned before too. People who work in engineering, also mechanical design degrees as well. So people who understand how machines work and how to create those machines and drawings.
Great. Allison, do you have any questions?
I do not see any quite yet, no.
Do you have any yourself?
I wanted to just take the opportunity to thank Jim, because I appreciate when you said you were telling your story, and I wrote it down, because you said they gave me the opportunity to find another path. And I think, I think as a young person, you know, I wish I could talk to my 17-year-old self, but to look at things in that light. They gave me an opportunity, and look where you are, right? So the sooner we know that as a person, but I appreciate your growth mindset and how, so that is true. So
I'll admit that that's the older self talking now.
I know, yes.
At the time, it might not have seemed that way.
Yeah.
But the moral of my story is and I guess if I had to hand down a piece of advice to a lot of students, is that never give up on your dream. And remember that a lot of people are telling high schoolers, especially, you know, high school, then college, then a job. And that's not exactly how it happened for me. And that's not how it works for everyone. But I think that continuing education and taking those classes and making sure that you're staying relevant and up on your craft, I think is the really important part.
You got it. There is a question. What's the coolest part of your job?
The coolest part of my job, I've kind of alluded to it a couple of times already. I really like the idea of how things work. I really enjoy drawing and solving problems. So in a way, I get to do mechanical things. Everything that I deal with is nuts and bolts and steel and plastic. But in the end, I'm really solving a problem for someone. So I like to be able to move the chess pieces around the board and find what it is that's the correct solution for some people. And I don't always have a solution. Sometimes I have to say, sorry, I can't help you. But most of the time I say, well, I can get you this far. And so it's a balancing act. I get to deal with customers, and I get to deal with people who really know what they're doing when it comes to using machines and building equipment. So it's fun.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tim. And I'm going to just share my screen here to transition. And also from NWTC, so they're just going to switch chairs here, is Jim Eckes, and he is going to be telling us about his position as an operations manager. So let me stop here so we can see Jim. There we go.
Thank you, Lynn. So my path, surprisingly, well, not so surprisingly, I guess, is it mirrors Tim's pretty good, actually. But my path kind of varied a lot from the high school point on, because in high school, I will admit I was a terrible student. I didn't apply myself real well, and I kind of thought the world just was going to owe me my path and give me whatever I wanted out of it. And when life comes up, slaps you in the face and says, no, it's not, then you really start thinking about things. In school, I had some really good interests as far as sciences. You know, I liked the physics, the chemistry, all kind of stuff. But the thing that really knocked me down was I was really bad at math. And you know, back then, where am I ever going to use this stuff? Who knows? What does algebra even mean anymore, you know? And so I didn't think I'd be able to succeed in any kind of continuing education or getting into college or anything like that. So the next logical step really was just to get a job, start making some money. You know, guys that age, most people that age want to buy their toys. You know, I wanted a fast car and all this other stuff. So got to have money to do that. And so I started looking out in the occupation field, and I landed at NWTC, actually. A friend of a friend got me in the door, and I started out kind of the same as Tim. I started in at an assembly entry-level position, building the conveyor systems for NWTC. Found out that I really had this mechanical ability that I didn't even know I had at the time. So it was a chance I took, and it really got me moving. It was one of those times, and if you ever think of yourself back and as you're doing things, you know, you get that aha moment, you know, the light comes on and you say, hey, well, I really like this, and I never would have thought about it before. So started working in that position, and the management team around me at the time noticed I had this mechanical ability, and they started moving me around through the plant, trying different things out. And I ended up in more of a fabricator role within a couple of years of working here. The first role I took on was working in what we call the turn department, and on a conveyor system, you've got curves that go around corners and things, and that all has to be fabricated and formed and assembled. And one of those things that I found out I had a knack for. It was a bit of an artwork form back then. You know, you didn't have, when I started, all the CNC equipment to help you do this stuff, so you were doing it by hand. And it was really amazing to me to get this product made up, put into a system, and watch how everything worked, and know that I had something to do with it. As that went along, again, more and more times that these leads and foremen noticed what I could do, they decided to offer me more and more positions around the plant. And one day, the machine shop supervisor asked me if I'd like to try out something in the machining field. And again, to my surprise, you know, something that I didn't even take a metals class in high school. Next thing I know, I'm working in a machine shop, and I'm doing entry-level stuff there, working on manual lathes and manual mills, and found out I had another knack in that also. But guess what happens with the machining world? there's a lot of math involved, and that was a little intimidating to me. But what I found out was, once I started getting involved with being able to apply it in a position like that, the math was all of a sudden really, really fun. I could put it into something, I could work trig. I did a lot of geometry, you're figuring angles and everything else out for this machinery, and it just turned the light on again. And I really fell in love with that aspect of math and creating these parts on machines. Little by little, I worked my way up again, much like Tim was talking about too. I got involved with some of the CNC machinery. I learned how to program and all the aspects of that. So metallurgy came along with that, some welding. Little by little, I'm starting to encompass just about every part of the fabrication area at NWTC at the same time. Now, along with some of this stuff, I started realizing that I still had a little bit of lacking in some of these skills. I could function and get by with it, but it wasn't enough anymore. And I realized, it's time to go on to school. And NWTC had offered some of these certification courses, and I got involved in each and every one of those just to make sure that I was rounding myself out as best I could. And with every one of those, obviously, along with some compensation from the company in the form of a pay raise with each one of those, I brought in a little bit more knowledge and got myself a little bit better position to be able to create some of these things. But it also created questions in my head, a little bit more about what's out there, what more can I do? So at one point I decided, and it might have been a little bit of cockiness in me thinking that I was that good, I decided to part ways with NWTC for a while and see what was out there. And I worked in one role as a fabricator in one plant, and then as a machinist in another. But lo and behold, I ended up coming back to NWTC and brought with me some of those experiences, which actually helped me, and I did grow a little bit, both in the field and emotionally, maturely, and found out that the position that was open here was for a second shift lead position in the machine shop, which I ended up taking. Working a little bit more into the management position, working with more of the leaders in the company a lot more than I was in the past, and making some decisions that really made a lot of money for the company in some cases. Some of the things that I really picked up on, like lean manufacturing, process improvement, quality management, all those kind of things that came along with this now. And I started making these decisions based on those and implementing some of the stuff. Well, implementing it a lot of times without permission, but hoping to God it worked out all right. In many cases it did. I had some failures, but I learned from them. Going through all these again, management noticed what I was doing with it, and they offered me a first shift foreman position in the machine shop. We're running the entire machine shop at that point. I'm now in charge of 13 people. I'm managing evaluations for employees. I'm doing interviews for new employees, and I'm working through apprenticeships for employees, things like that. And started to see that I was starting to drift away from creating the parts that I like to do so much and more into a management role. Lo and behold, this was kind of the plan of upper level management to get me into that position because they thought that I had the potential to do that. I was fighting it for quite a while because I thought, I'm a machinist. I want to make these parts forever. This is what I want to do. But they'd throw me these challenges little by little, and more I started to really love the management aspect of it. And I still had the opportunity to stay really involved with the manufacturing side of the machining, the fabrication, that kind of stuff in the plant. It was just waiting to happen that with the advent of CNC coming in more and more, and we started really advancing our machinery, other facets that open up with that, and I started working into some IT support because the machines have to talk to the network, things like that. Actually, the HR side of things, so that all transitioned through to the point where they said, hey, we've got a plant manager position open and we think you'd be good at it. Now, it was a little intimidating. I went from 13 people of being responsible for up to 60, and now I'm also responsible for all the other departments and some that I really wasn't that understanding of. There was some opportunities out there for me to pick up on even more. So I transitioned into a little bit more education while I was working. And fortunately for us, NWTC has certain programs where they will spend a certain amount of money on you to help you out with these classes, provided you get a C or better. We do some reimbursements and things like that, and I took full advantage of all that stuff. Now, keep in mind that I really didn't start taking a lot of these classes until I was almost 28 years old. So I was the old guy in the room for quite a while after that, and moved on through a lot more of the lean manufacturing, but I really got heavy involved in the communication part of it and the management part of it, learning those soft skills. And I can't stress that enough. You know, there's so many different personalities that you will deal with in your life. To have those and be able to work through them, that it's incredibly important. As time went on, the plant manager position kind of morphed into what the operations manager position, which I'm currently in now. But now I'm responsible for plant maintenance and obviously a resource deployment, you know, getting people to the right place at the right time, logistics, freight, handling, all this kind of stuff that goes along with this. And one of the most important things now is I'm the head of the safety committee with the plant now, making sure that we are compliant, first of all, but really one of the best part of my jobs is, you know, dealing with the employees every day, making sure that they go home safe to their families every night, and to make sure that we've got a safe, clean work environment for them all the way through. As far as talking to the students that we're doing right now too, and if they really want to get into manufacturing as a whole, regardless of any occupation you want to get into, and I mentioned this before already, the soft skills, the communication part of it is so important. Listening effectively, being able to sit down and have somebody talk to you and actually get what they're saying and projecting yourself correctly back to them. You know, don't jump into the conversation, make sure you understand what they're really trying to convey. We deal with customers from all over the country and all over the world in some cases, especially lately now with the virtual. There's a lot less of the emotion in the conversation in some cases, and you really have to learn how to filter through a lot of that stuff. So regardless of your occupation, you really need to try mastering and practicing those soft skills continuously. That's a really big part of it. You should always strive to improve yourself. Try to make yourself better no matter what path you try to get involved with. There's always room for every one of us to improve all the way out throughout your life. Not just in the business, but also in your personal lives too. You know, and that'll help you develop those contacts and throughout your time there. And I want everybody just to steer us back to manufacturing for a little bit here, to consider the manufacturing environment and manufacturing occupations. Keep in mind that they used to have a stigma that the manufacturing operations were these dark, dirty, dingy places all the time. And I got to tell you, it's not like that anymore. They're clean, well-lit, very safe places, and it can be a pretty incredible, lucrative career for you.
Okay, thanks. I was just going to have Allison check the chat. If you've got any questions for Jim, I love all of the emphasis that you put on employability skills. That's something that we also talk about quite a bit with our school districts and with students, is the importance of those employability skills. So do we have any other questions, Allison?
I don't see any questions quite yet, other than I can ask the same question. What's the coolest part of your job?
Working with the employees here, absolutely. I've got a team, an incredible team. They're always looking to learn more. They're always asking to do more. They're on the job constantly. They really nose the grindstones all the time, and I appreciate what they do. But they work together well. I mean, that's a huge part of why we're so successful. And I can't give them all enough credit. And I wouldn't be here doing my job if it wasn't for all of them, for sure.
That's great. And I want to say the one thing that I heard from you that I think is so important too is people saw skills in you that you didn't see in yourself. And that too is a part of career development. And you know, trust the people around you. When they say you're pretty good at something, listen to them. So thank you for sharing that part of your story.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So before I jump back to sharing my screen, I want to introduce the next speaker so you can have the opportunity to see her. And that is Jill Thede, the Associate Dean of Trades and Engineering Technologies at NWTC.
Good morning. I'm excited to speak with you all this morning and to share a little bit about my story and how I ended up spending a good portion of the past 30 years in manufacturing. So as Lynn shares, you know, the screen that some of the PowerPoints that I put together, I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I grew up right here on the west side of Green Bay. And a lot of what you're going to hear as I talk about my path through engineering and manufacturing is you don't know where this is going to take you. So I think Tim and Jim's stories also reflect the same, that when you start on this path, what's really exciting is that there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of crossroads to make choices. And that's what makes it so exciting. So back when I was, in high school, similar to what I think it was Jim said, I really liked science, but I also really loved math. But I was also very much also into forensics and drama and doing presentations and that type of information. My mom was a teacher and my dad was an engineer. And so those were the two careers that I was most exposed to and I was thinking most about. But I knew one of the key things about me was that I loved solving problems and working on puzzles. And that's really what drew me into engineering. And so Lynn, the next slide. So after I graduated from high school, I went down to UW-Madison to their College of Engineering. And I spent the next 5 years going through a 4-year program to get my bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering. And part of why I took longer than what is, the typical time, the duration they tell you, is because I spent time doing co-ops and internships. And I will tell you that is one of the best decisions that I made in my life, was to take that time and go work for some companies and see what kind of work you could actually do as an engineer. Because that information really helped me make good choices in the future. So I spent 2 summers out in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, with Eastman Kodak, 2 summers and a semester, which was fantastic. I worked on digital sensors and imagers, things I had never seen before. And when I would come back to school, I would see how that project work really tied into the learning and the courses I was taking. My final summer before I graduated, I went out to California and I spent a summer out in the San Francisco Bay Area working for Hewlett-Packard and got an opportunity to see some other new technology. When it came time to graduate, it was interesting because I ended up going with Procter & Gamble right back in Green Bay, Wisconsin. But it was this great opportunity for me to work there in manufacturing. So Lynn, next slide. And what was, from an electrical and computer engineer, you'd be surprised to say, what did you do? I helped make toilet paper. If you look at the machine on the bottom of the page there, that is your typical machine that makes toilet paper or paper towels. It literally has thousands of devices that are used to make toilet paper and paper towels. It's an incredibly complex piece of equipment. And as an electrical engineer, I was working with a team of 12 electrical technicians, and as different devices would have problems or would fault or would fail, we were solving those problems on a daily basis to keep that equipment running as efficiently and effectively as possible, making as much toilet paper, making as much Charmin and Bounty as it possibly could. We also worked on doing preventative maintenance. So you'll hear a little bit more about that in the future, but preventative maintenance, trying to make sure that we that we could solve the problems, identify things that were going to be failing, and get those changed out. Working with people, when we talk about those soft skills, the ability to listen to others and help get a group of folks all pulling in the same direction, all trying to make sure we have the same goals, was some of the most key skills I had there. After 5 years, I moved to Cincinnati. Next slide. And there I got to work with a team to actually lead some of these big projects to install those pieces of equipment. So I was working with projects that were, about $1 million projects, and helping develop some of the schedules to determine what was all the equipment, what were all the skills people would need, what would be the actual raw materials we would need, and develop all of those schedules and those layouts. I think Jim talked about that as well, making sure everything fits into the building the right way. And then one of the most fun things that I got to do as an engineer was help lead those startups. So we would install that equipment, and it would go from just being a bunch of equipment to actually running and making a product. And then I could see that product on the store shelves, over at Walmart or at Target. And that was really exciting. with that project work, you know, when you think about the places I got to go, I did projects in Pennsylvania, in Missouri, California, Georgia. I got the opportunity to go all around the country helping install and start up that equipment. One of the other really cool things is in this global world that we're living in with, you know, economies that go across all of our national borders, I got to go to Italy and we purchased some of our equipment from an Italian vendor, as well as to Germany, and get to meet some, you know, of our vendors in Germany. And so when you think about those skills about being able to listen and communicate, understanding how to work across cultures is really important. Next slide. Similar to what you know, folks were saying, I also felt like I needed more knowledge and I needed more skills as I was going on this journey. So I went back to school. At this point, I was living in Cincinnati, Ohio with P&G, and I went back to school 2 to 3 nights a week to get my master's degree in business. And that was great. I got a better understanding of profits and losses and balance sheets. You know, when I was in engineering school, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about that. But going back for my master's allowed me, master's in business, that additional 2 to 3 years of training helped me better understand the full business. The other cool thing is while I was going to school, I got to do a week-long seminar in Barcelona, Spain. And then the next year, I got to do a week-long seminar in Toulouse, France. Again, learning how to work across cultural boundaries and talk to folks from different areas. Next slide. So now I had been gone from Wisconsin for about 5 years and I missed it. So I was looking for opportunities to get a little closer to home and use a little bit more of my business degree. And I moved into marketing. Marketing is where you help develop the products with the product development folks to meet the customer needs. So you're working with the sales team and you're working with product development. So I was working on putting together videos and information that we could use to help sell the equipment and really understand what are those equipment needs. And during that time, I was living and working in Mequon, but my bosses were down in South Carolina. So I'd be traveling down there every 6 to 8 weeks. And I also was taking regular trips to North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina where the mills were, where we actually made the products that I was helping to sell. And then I'd also go to some of our customer sites around the country. Next one. So finally, as I was working down in Milwaukee, right near Milwaukee in Mequon, I got the opportunity to come back home to Green Bay and work for Paper Converting Machine Company in technical sales. So now I'm using my engineering degree, understanding how equipment works, and helping to sell this equipment to other engineers. So here I was selling equipment that was anywhere from $450,000 to one project that I sold that was $26 million. And that included a lot of equipment to make toilet paper and paper towels. I would visit a lot of the companies, get to understand what their needs were. I would help negotiate the deals and determine what all equipment would be included, how much would be paid, all those business terms. Because I was an engineer, I could help write those specifications so it was crystal clear exactly what we were going to be providing them. One of the more fun things that I got to do was doing presentations at technology conferences down in New Orleans and in Miami. And the other thing that I was working on is working on rebuilds of existing equipment and helping them use their existing equipment. But by adding new controls and new computers, we could make that equipment much more efficient. And during that time, I got the opportunity to visit a lot of different places, including Australia, Germany, Poland, Italy. But the main places I got to visit were Tulsa, Oklahoma, Chester, Pennsylvania, which is a small town outside of Philadelphia, and Beach Island, South Carolina, where there's not a beach nor an island. So I spent a lot of time in mills where they make the toilet paper and paper towels. But it was this great opportunity to get to work with customers. Next slide. Then in my last 2 years at Paper Converting, there was an opportunity to start working with a team of engineers and looking at Industry 4.0. That's a term you may hear when folks talk about manufacturing. It is what is considered our fourth industrial revolution. And we are just, we are coming into this fourth industrial revolution. If you remember back in your social studies, the first one was the mechanization, starting to use mechanics and assembly lines. The second one was when we added power and started now adding those conveyors that NERCON makes. The third is back in the 1980s and 90s when we started adding computers, programmable logic controllers, when we added that into our manufacturing process. And now Industry 4.0 is where we're taking all of this computer capability to store data, to get that data from the equipment and use that data to improve processes. Next slide. So some of the key things that you'll hear about when we talk about Industry 4.0 is that it's not necessarily about reducing the amount of people in manufacturing, but what we need are people with new skills. We need skills to be able to work with computers and take that data and make things happen. You'll hear about things like the Internet of Things or augmented reality or cloud computing. And this is all part of how we get data from the manufacturing floor and be able to use that to solve problems and make manufacturing more efficient, higher quality products, and more productive. Next slide. And that's what led me then to my final position that I'm currently in, is working at NWTC. And that here I'm working with our engineering technology programs that you see listed. And all of those are about how do we provide the skills that are going to help make people successful in manufacturing and in careers going forward with this new Industry 4.0 technology. So we provide both certificates and 2-year associate degrees that help people get those skills necessary so that they can be leading in manufacturing going forward. Next slide. So some of those key programs that you'll see here, these are 2-year programs coming out of high school. You can see we've got the biomedical degree. After 2 years, we have 100% placement of our students who completed that degree, and they come out making about $50,000 a year. We have our electromechanical program that has almost full placement at $62,000 a year. So if you go to my final slide, just want to try to make sure folks know that there are some great opportunities in manufacturing. I have had an incredibly interesting career in the last 30 years, getting to visit a lot of places through a career in manufacturing. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. I have one when you were talking about when you were doing marketing. And I know that we have terms like marketing and advertising and graphic design. Are those all the same thing, or do they do a little bit different things?
They all do a little bit different things, all working together to try to sell the products. So marketing tends to be a little more focused on what products are going to be needed by the customer. So you're understanding the customer needs and you're understanding what can we provide. So you're really that person who brings those two things together. Advertising is saying, okay, now we have a product. How do we sell it? Let's get the information out there to people and sell it. What are the messages we need to be telling our customers? And those graphic designers are the folks who really figure out how to take that message that advertising says is the right message, and how do you put that in a format that really appeals to people and lets them see that message and it jumps out at them from the screen or the page or however you're connecting. So again, there's all these different, for every person, hopefully there is one of these fits of the skill set and the needs in terms of the work that can be done.
Great. Allison?
I don't see any questions in the chat, so please, we have a little bit of time left. If you do have a question or two, we would love to be able to ask Jill. And Jill, for me, the takeaway I got, which I appreciate, so the concept of engineering there's different definitions of engineering, and sometimes people may lose sight of that. There's that hands-on component. There's the business office side component. There's a marketing side. So that's great, I think, for folks just to realize that engineering is a lot of different avenues.
Yeah, I really think that's really important. To me, engineering is all about solving problems. And you can do that in so many different ways. Engineers aren't just the people who are doing designs behind a computer sitting in an office. A lot of time, engineers are people out there solving problems on the manufacturing floor. Or an engineer can be in there selling products and becoming a technical salesperson. Or an engineer could be writing the technical documentation that helps people understand how to use this equipment. So if you like math and science and solving problems, but there's other stuff you like too, and you don't want to just sit in an office for 40 hours doing design, engineering can still be a fantastic degree, a fantastic skill set to get to take that into all kinds of different careers and opportunities. It's really about learning how to solve problems and then taking that to a number of different places.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jill, for joining us today and letting us know about your path and all the exciting things and a little preview of Industry 4.0. That's something that we'd like to come back to later this school year and really dig into that. So speaking of that, if you haven't already registered for our 3 other job spotlights that are coming up, we'll also be focusing on Manufacturing Month, so manufacturing jobs. The next one coming up is October 7th from 10 to 11. And again, we're going to be focusing on welding and machining with some employees from Fincantieri Marinette Marine, and again, some of our post-secondary folks from NWTC. So there's a link to the registration. I sent you a link to a slide deck that will have all of these links in it, so you can very easily just click from there, or if you've got a smartphone, you can take a picture of the QR code, and that will send you right to the registration link. And last but not least, thank you for joining us at this first attempt at virtual job spotlight. So we would love your feedback so that we can continue to make these really great tools for you as you're looking at your future careers. So we've got a survey form. Again, you can, through the link that I send you, you can click into the survey through the link, or you can just take a picture of the QR code and that will send you right to our survey form. And again, this is a joint effort between CESA 8, Inspire Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, and the New Manufacturing Alliance, bringing information about manufacturing occupations to you as students. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you at one of the next job spotlights coming up in October. Thanks so much.